Good morning, everyone.
Like they're in a room and somebody's
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Friday, November 4th Land Use Committee meeting. We are going to get started in a moment, but to start, I wanted to just inform this group that we've received two really key grants most recently. Some of you have probably already heard about the first grant, which was a community housing navigator program that we applied for through Invest New Hampshire. It's a position with the city, a full-time person that we will be hiring for 2 years. We received $250,000 to cover the cost of this person and for this person to do outreach within the community to basically help us get all the information that we need for our zoning.
But also, don't forget, one of the first tasks is not just the public involvement plan, but the ADU handbook, which we've heard so much about as a really important deliverable for this project. So
Stealing all my thunder.
yeah, sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right.
Because I know there's a lot of interest in that. Yeah.
There is. The second grant that we just got awarded about a week ago, so we haven't actually voted on it at City Council yet, but I'm sure we'll be happy to do so, is that we're receiving $82,000 to help hire a consultant in which to be able to help us rework the actual nitty-gritty regulations for our phase incentive plans. So super exciting stuff. And I'd like to make a special thank you to Beverly Zent, our planning director, who did an amazing job crafting these grants and getting them out there in pretty much a short order. I think I gave her a week for the first one. So amazingly, she got them both done and we've been awarded the money. So that's exciting news because this group will definitely be working with the community housing navigator person who's basically going to be doing everything housing for 2 years with the city. So exciting stuff on the horizon.
Congratulations. Well done.
Our member Corey Clark is coming. He's running a little bit late, so he'll be joining us in a short future here. So at the last meeting, we took a bunch of comments regarding the ADU changes. Some of the changes that were made were to the purpose statement. We updated that. I know we've changed the overall height of detached ADUs. We also clarified some of the language, and we also added some requirements for signage on properties of permitted. So when someone's putting in an application for an ADU, there's going to be a sign requirement that they post, and when that will give notification to all of the butters, I can't talk this morning, sorry. At that point, their recourse is that all residents can appeal building permits. So if a building permit is actually in process, they can appeal any building permit.
Well, they can
and then
also,
maybe you can explain a little bit more about that.
So there will be an administrative decision that comes. So you cannot make the administrative decision. It has to be posted for 30 days. So there's no administrative decision to be made until the posting period is over. So then the appeal process to that would be to the Board of Adjustment to the administrative decision of the director.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
how,
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be how it would go.
How it would go. Okay, so there, that's been clarified. 'Cause
It does
we talked
provide
about
that.
several different options in that, which way we'll go. Were there any other changes that you'd like to highlight?
The parking was clarified.
Okay, and the parking was also clarified.
Could we do anything with the deed restriction versus the affidavit?
Yes, we did add that we are going to record an affidavit as well. You're
So
right.
one
Forgetting
thing
about
that I wanted to offer, and I should have offered this sooner, is that we do record the ADU letters of decision, and those, I would think, would turn up in a title search. I imagine they would turn up in a title search because all those letters of decisions for every ADU are recorded, the deed of registries. So I think that was our way of trying to ensure that it is always going to be owner occupied, that person would be notified that it had to be owner occupied. So we can certainly do this, but I just want to say that we did have, we do have a mechanism that we already.
I guess, yeah, that wasn't, I don't think, actually in our previous one. So I guess maybe that's the word we can change from an affidavit to the notice of decision.
Yeah, I mean, we could just change that too, because it's not in there, but we do it, so I don't know.
Right, it's just,
Yeah.
we just need to make sure it's so clear. So we
Yeah.
can definitely update that to be the notice of decision.
Yep.
I think I used the word, yeah, here it is.
Yeah, I think.
Which section is
It's
that?
10-81422. There it is.
How does that, because we also have the recording in 814 147.1, that's what you're talking about, Beverly, right? The documentation of that's a conditional use of permit approval.
Right, we're talking about for the so, let me look at the other one.
81471.
7.1 is what we already had.
Documentation should record the Rockingham. Yeah, so that's, I guess that's what we do have. I guess we did have it in
That's
there.
the conditional use
Yeah,
permit.
so
We're talking
that-
about the notice of decision for like permitted, right?
Permitted,
So
okay.
we don't have it, we want to make sure we capture both, right?
Okay,
So, wait, so the notice of decision, that is for the conditional use permit? That,
Right,
so
which
that-
right now, all of them allow, right?
right.
So,
require the notice of decision for the CUP to be filed with the deed of record, the deed of registry, so I'm just trying, registry of deeds, so.
right, so I guess
So-
my question is whether they're permitted or a conditional use permit, I want to make sure they're both captured.
So
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry. Yes, of
Yeah.
course,
there
yeah,
will
of
be-
course.
Do you see what?
So there'll be two items that are recorded in the registry. One is, in the case of a conditional use permit, there'll be two items. One will be the conditional use permit itself, and the other will be this affidavit as to primary
Or
residence.
just a notice of decision, whatever we want to call it. I don't really care, but you see where I'm trying to capture both sides.
So the affidavit essentially, I think, binds that, it binds them to the degree that an affidavit can bind them, but I think that the letter of decision is supposed to bind all future property owners, so.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying. She's also saying that in the case of administrative approval, we have to capture that.
Yeah.
Right.
So and
not
that's,
CP.
so maybe it's not the affidavit. I didn't really understand that addition, because as you say, the affidavit only applies to the initial applicant.
So then but we
So-
should change it to a notice of decision, administrative decision, maybe.
Well, I'm just wondering whether, instead of putting it in 22, we should just change
Change and move it.
the other one in 71 to refer not just only to conditional use permits, but also to approved.
I think that is.
Administrative notices of, yeah, okay.
I think that makes sense.
We'll just move it, okay.
And I don't know that the affidavit, essentially, they're saying they're not going to break the law, but they can't really break the law. It's always going to be driven by.
A notice of
yeah.
decision is probably better.
I think
yeah.
it's probably sufficient, and
Yeah.
and they don't have to sit, that's our city ordinance, so.
Okay.
Does that make sense now? We captured both?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't bring that information,
No.
I just lost that.
Is there anything else I'm missing that has been changed? Or any questions from anyone else? How are you feeling with all the changes we made on that?
Good. That's everything I had on my list.
Yeah, I don't think we missed anything. All right, then there has been some feedback on the assisted living and whether or not there are some of the areas based off of the use that we should keep as a special exception. So I guess maybe we just need to talk about that a little bit. And it had to do with, it's because it is going to be more of a business than just a residential. We were thinking it's going to be a multifamily residential, but now it's going to be more of a business. There will be, deliveries. Granted, there won't be as many cars because they don't actually drive, but there's the employees that work there. So I guess it's going to depend on the size of what they are. So I guess we all just need to figure out whether or not there are some of these that we've changed to a permitted that maybe should go back to a special exception.
So the smaller of the two is the home, and the larger is the center, correct, so.
Yes.
Home is 5 or less, so, yeah. I just want to make that distinction, so that as we look at those, we understand.
Multifamily and the H, yes. Yeah, I'm just gonna look at that. It makes it so much easier sometimes. So, we have, so maybe in some of the tighter neighborhoods,
That would make sense.
I think just in what we would consider the denser neighborhoods, I think we could change it. Hello, Mr. Clark. So. AD Assisted Living Center in the GAMH should go from N to S versus N to P.
So you're in the assisted living center. Are you looking at the?
Centers in the homes.
Center. You're looking at the center one.
Yeah, looking at the stuff we changed.
Oh, I see what you're saying, N to S.
We changed a lot
We
of.
went from not permitted to permitted. Maybe it should go from not permitted to special exception.
So are we, before you go on, are we okay with the assisted living homes, or is that? We have
It's
this.
because they were below. I was looking at them second.
Oh, I was
I'm,
looking at- I was
I'm
looking at
looking
this-
at this chart.
Yeah, I was looking at the explanation as to why we're doing things, so.
sorry. I'm like looking at the chart because it's easier to see them all at the same time.
I think that is probably a more graceful sort of transition from
Yeah.
the next step that opens up the gate, I think, so.
So,
Right.
so say this again. So which ones are you,
So I guess I was just going to, if you're looking at the chart, for centers, I say we keep them as special exceptions in GRC and GAMH. And then I would think assisted living homes in the tighter GRA and GRC, maybe we keep them as a special exception.
okay, so
But the
center,
GAMH.
so
is
GRCA you would keep as special exception. GAMH you would change from P to S, right?
correct for centers, and right below that, I would change the GRA, GRB, and GRC to back to S. So keep them the way they are,
Okay.
and just do the permitted in the less dense.
So we'd keep permitted in the downtown
I
and
think so, yeah, because those are more
G1,
business.
G2, and B.
Those are more
Okay.
business.
Okay. So the only thing we're changing here is GAMH. The only thing we're changing from our proposal is to change GAMH to S.
Yes, because the other ones are going back.
But GAMH is not necessarily always a dense district. I mean, isn't this like
Okay.
on Route 1?
So you want to keep those,
Well, I'm just saying, that's more like a Route 1 district, isn't it? Or
I believe so, yeah. We don't have very many of
we
them.
don't? I mean, we used to have more, but I think a lot of them were changed to Gateway.
Let's keep that S as well.
Okay. Keep that S. Okay.
Yep. So basically, everything in that first zones are all going to be S's.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay.
Oh, and then, yeah, I think the rest of them,
So we changed a lot of assisted living homes from S to P.
right. And now it's just the MRO, CD4, and MRB.
Changing those from P back to S?
I don't know. I'm looking for discussion. I don't want to be the only one talking.
I mean, I understand the S on the denser for the assisted living centers, but I think for the homes, I feel comfortable with the P in the.
In the MRO, CD4, MRB
I mean,
area.
it's five or less, which could be, the size of a family.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
And I
two-family
just,
home,
I mean, like knowing the Clipper Home, the Edgewood Center, and yes, there are deliveries and stuff like that, but like a small home wouldn't constitute deliveries like they would get,
Right, right.
Yeah, and I think the purpose of this whole thing is to, try to.
Incorporate some of those within residential.
Yeah, and encourage the,
All right. Anyone else?
2 cents.
And Corey, I know you arrived a little late, so we can go back and, sorry, we jumped ahead to assisted living. We were talking about some of the changes.
Before you leave this,
Yep.
so are we saying that there were no changes to the assisted living home? Or are we saying there were changes to assisted living home?
Assisted, no, we're, from what we've proposed, the only thing we're changing is those first three from going back to S's.
Okay, so under assisted living home, we're changing GRA, GRB, GRC, and GAMH to S?
Everything from MRO over, we're leaving as permitted, as is, as
Well-
changed, as proposed.
I had two, the strike-through shows that, oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
So we're,
Yeah.
okay, so we are going back. Okay, I just want to clarify that.
And forgive me if this is someplace where I don't see it, but the definition of a assisted living facility is what?
The definition is, I don't have it with me.
I know.
It's in the handout.
It's open, it's not age restricted.
Do you want a handout, Craig?
No, I've got them, what,
Assisted living facility is a building or group of buildings providing housing and supportive services and care for persons who require assistance with daily living activities but do not require the skilled nursing and medical care provided in a nursing home or other residential care facility. Such supportive services include the provision of meals, housekeeping, laundry, transportation, daily personal care, dispensing of medications, and 24 hours per day staffing. An assisted living facility includes one or more community dining rooms in which meals are provided to all residents, and each individual assisted living unit may also have a kitchenette. Other than any accommodations provided for use by the facility staff, only assisted living units are provided as part of an assisted living facility. And then under that, an assisted living home provides 5 or fewer residents, and assisted living center provides 6 or more residents.
okay. Nothing about licensing or,
Nothing about there,
Yeah.
because that's not, I mean, it's not really a zoning thing. I think this
Right.
is really about
Where we
the
allow
use.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else on assisted living?
So I just have a question now. So, I guess not. So anything in a residential district is going to be special exception? Any residential district?
Correct. The only, for centers, the only thing that's permitted is in the slightly mixed zones.
Okay.
So the G1, the G2, the CD5-4.
Yep.
Nick, it feels like part of this was brought forward because we had some specific inquiries. Do you recall maybe what those were, and would this have assisted with any of those inquiries? I can't remember specifically.
I think it was primarily related to the fact that it's virtually impossible to do this anywhere. So it was more of a
Opening up,
map issue, district,
which I think we have,
addressed.
we've addressed, so. All right, there are no more questions there. So, Mr. Clark, what I had, we'd gone over quickly was the changes we'd made since the last draft, which we had updated the purpose statement, which there had been some feedback about. We'd cleaned up some language due to some comments. We added lower height from 25 down to 22 feet. We updated the notice requirements. So there was a request regarding noticing abutters. So now there is a process similar to what we do in Demolition Review Committee. There will be signs clearly posted for 30 days so that people can appeal administrative decision of approval if that's what is done. So that got added, and that whether it's administratively approved or through a conditional use permit, they'll all be recorded at the Registry of Deeds so that there's notice of the approval of the requirements that it's a ADU. And we cleared up the parking language. Did I forget anything? I think that was everything, the changes since the last draft that we made.
great.
Those are the things. And I don't know if you got to watch our last meeting, but I did ask all your questions and we got answers for them all.
Awesome. Thank you.
So I know we talked about them and there were answers. I didn't bring them with me. I apologize. But yeah. Does anyone have anything else to talk about this? If not, we can open up to the public hearing and then we can talk further. I seeing no one look anywhere. Okay. Does anybody from the public want to come up and speak?
Good morning, my name is Liza Hewitt. I live at 726 Middle Road. I have a few things. The list is getting shorter. Page 5. This came to me. It may not be anything, but I just want to double check and triple check and make sure. Under 10.814.12, the only one accessory dwelling unit shall be allowed on any lot. Does that include a DADU? So if
Any-
someone
any.
has a DA, someone has gotten permission to build a DADU and decides to put an ADU within their house, there is absolutely no way any lawyer in the country could come in and argue that point in court. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that
They can
comes
argue
straight
the
from,
point.
well, they can always argue. Everyone can
Well,
always
it is-
argue, but they'll never win.
The larger category is ADU, and then it drills down to DADU and AADU, but that captures both of the two.
Okay, I just wanted to, that's why we're here, right? To make sure. Page 6, the lot area. I asked about this last time. This is more me not understanding what the changes have been made as far as the minimum lot area. It appears some changes have been made with regard to minimum lot area, so I just have a question about what you are allowing now that you did not allow before. So are you allowing it, obviously, I'm assuming you're allowing more density. I just want to understand what that means, like in layman's terms. If you could explain that maybe afterwards, I can go through the rest, or you can explain it now, whatever you want to do.
right?
I think it's pretty easy to explain, and I think it's an important point to explain, because aside from allowing it permitted through administrative appeal for the two places where we've allowed that with attached ADUs and cottage houses, and that doesn't expand, which are the two, this is probably the most significant, I would say, change in terms of making it a little easier, and has been problematic and driven people into a category often that they didn't fit into because they're trying to avoid doubling their lot size. So I think it is a pretty easy thing to explain. In certain districts, and I think maybe Nick can help me, we did require that the lot size be doubled. You had to have, for the dwelling unit was counted as a new unit, and so if 15,000 square feet was required, I think in SRB and SRA, you had to have 30,000. And so we were, a lot of times, because that wasn't the criteria for garden cottage, people were saying it was a garden cottage, but it really fit better in a detached ADU. So this really does treat them all the same. It is a smaller version that is part of, and we treat the entire thing as if it's a single ADU for the lot. And this is
Beverly,
that is
just bring
that is
your
a big change.
microphone a little
Oh,
closer.
sorry. So that is, I think, I think Rick or Nick or probably Councilor Moreau could probably explain that more clearly. But I think that is one of the big changes in those districts. It does not require double lot size.
Okay, then I would like to request maybe of this committee, when this is explained to the planning board and the public again, where you may have more people watching, that you explain that, because I think that, it struck me because I thought, well, this is going to be more density in a smaller lot, and I think that residents need to know that. I'm not dissing it. I'm just saying that I think that, to me, that is a big change. And I had questions about it before, and I knew there was something, and I just didn't understand. And if I didn't understand it, I think other people won't either. So if you could just make a note possibly to do that, really explain it when you explain it. All right, I got to address the parking thing. So better. I'm thrilled to see there are no fractions in there anymore. However,
Which section?
this is on,
Page 7.
page 7, 25. So when I read this, and I think I've got it, you are telling, first of all, you can only have 2 bedrooms in an ADU, right? No more. You can have 1 bedroom, or you can have 2 bedrooms. So if your ADU is up to 749 square feet, and you have a 1 bedroom, you have 1 parking spot. If you have a 749 square foot ADU and you have 2 bedrooms, you have 1 parking spot. But if you have a 751 square foot and you have 2 bedrooms, 2 square feet more, you need 2 parking spots. Call me crazy, but how does that make any sense whatsoever? to me, you need to look at bedrooms. You should be looking at bedrooms. You should not be looking at square footage. That doesn't make any sense. You could have, so why would you have a 751 square foot ADU with one bedroom in it and need 2 parking spots, but you only need 1 parking spot if it's 749 square feet? That doesn't make any sense. I mean,
The reason we do it this way is because that's how we calculate parking across the board in our zoning. So that's
And there
it's by
isn't,
square
there is
footage.
not a direct correlation between bedrooms and parking spaces.
spaces.
And how people choose to
there's
occupy.
not between square footage.
No, but the existing zoning, which is how it's been for 15 or 20 years, this is exactly what the zoning says for any dwelling unit. So you would actually have to change, rather than make it more strict for an accessory dwelling unit, the idea would be, to address your concern, you'd have to go back to the parking section in the parking section of the zoning ordinance, which, as I say, has been in place for 15 or 20 years, and change that so that and that would change the accessory dwelling units.
And I'm going to add to that, because I just did some calculations. You weren't asked, you wrote this revision, right? From the last meeting.
I was asked to clarify
Yeah.
what the existing
So,
parking regulations
To
meant.
give you credit here
Yeah.
for the folks that are concerned about parking, because what you chose to write, and unless I'm reading it wrong, is more conservative than what.
No, it's actually what the existing zoning says.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
If you do a 500 square foot ADU, you're only required to have half a space, a 500 square foot apartment anywhere in
You're
Portsmouth.
required to have one space because it says to round up.
You have to round up,
But
remember?
are you rounding, so what's not clear to me, and this is good for the conversation, if you have multiple uses in one structure, I don't think you're rounding up for each use and then totaling each use within a building. You're going to add up 0.5 to 1.3, get 2.8 or 1.8, and you round it up to 2.
Yeah, if you
So
have
you've
two-
not done that.
right, if
You've
you-
gone further here because and I think it's good for the folks that are concerned about parking, because you're saying, we're saying, it's not you, what's on the page here says, if, it doesn't matter whether you're doing 500 square feet, 499, or 750, you've got to have one space. That's a higher standard than everybody else outside of an ADU. If you're doing two 749 units, the main house and the ADU, that's also 2.6, which is 3 spaces. So this is requiring
It ends up being higher
4
because
spaces, or 1 if it's less than 750. So this is more conservative than what's the underlying zoning already is for units that are not ADUs, based on size. So I think it's,
Okay, so I guess what I would argue, a couple of things. This is a concern for abutters.
Yeah.
You did your survey, you heard this. This was close to number 1 concern was parking. So I really think, what was the point of doing the survey if you're not addressing, so,
which is why it's more conservative.
I don't know
than the
that we ever
underlying.
drilled down, and I wonder to
Restricted, yeah.
myself if there's
Okay.
maybe on-street parking occurring, on-street parking occurring, because it is, I think you're right, because it is a use that's kind of on its own. If you think about, like, recently approved 111 State, all those were combined together, and then we sort of went up, we rounded up, but in this case, it's always going to be rounded up, every time. Sometimes it's when they're aggregated together, then you round up and you pick up maybe an extra half there. But in this case, it'll always pick up an
It's
extra half.
rounded up and it's cumulative.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
difference.
yeah.
It's not cumulative outside this ordinance.
So I guess and I think just to reiterate the point that Rick made, to make it more onerous and to apply a standard that's harder for ADUs, keeping in mind that we had 2 directives: remove barriers, and there's been a couple barriers removed, but also clarify and make sure the standards are very clear. And I think in terms of doing that, we've added a lot of, I can tell you right now, the standards that are in place now quite possibly could preclude many of the ADUs that we have cited. So I think we have raised the standard, created that predictable outcome for what the ADUs look like. But I think to make that more onerous would be problematic because we wouldn't be treating it like we treat other residential uses. That said, we did never drill down on that, and I'm wondering if what happens is that we do see occasionally in areas where we might have higher density, we start to see on-street parking. I don't know, because they were just said they're concerned about it. And they could be concerned about, future ADUs, that we would want to make sure that they have to park on site. I don't know what's happening out
But remember,
there.
they're going to need a conditional use permit to deal with any of those particular instances. So just as an example, if you did 10 units in one building and they were over 750 square feet, you'd only need 13 spaces today in the existing zoning. If they were all ADUs, which we're not talking about multiple ADUs, but using this methodology, there'd be 20 spaces. That's a 50% increase in parking requirements in the ADU as drafted today versus what was here last month. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm just wanting to be clear. There's been an effort here to bump it up considerably, a 50% increase in what would normally be required. We go from 3 spaces often to 4 as a mandatory minimum for an ADU 750 or more, which is the bulk of the ADUs.
So I would say that we're talking about neighborhoods. I'm not talking about downtown. I'm not talking about 10-unit apartment. I'm not talking about 21 micro units at the Stady. I'm talking about the Elwyn Park neighborhood. I'm talking about Panaway Manor neighborhood. I'm talking about Middle Road neighborhood, not downtown. And I think that, when I watched the discussion where people from West End Yards came back and said we don't have enough parking based on your parking regulations, that if we have a 2-bedroom apartment, they want 2 cars, that's what I'm looking at.
That's
Those
an
are the
urban
kinds of
environment,
things.
though. We're back in the urban environment, talking
I'm-
about West End Yards, yeah.
Okay, well, you can explain it, and I can hear what you're saying, and I can tell you that I don't agree with you, and I think that if you've got 2 bedrooms, no matter how much you wish everybody was on bicycles, right now in 2022, if you have 2 bedrooms and you're renting to someone for $2,500 a month, it's probably very likely not going to be a family. It's going to be 2 single people that are living in that apartment with their 2 cars, and they're going to be parking in neighborhoods, not downtown. That's what I'll say about parking. I guess we can agree to disagree, maybe. I don't agree with that. So page 10, and I read 10, 8, 14, 41. The DADU shall not have more than 2 bedrooms and shall not be larger than 750 square foot gross floor area, except as permitted through a conditional use permit. Does that mean that you can have more than 2 bedrooms with a conditional use permit? That's what it says.
No, it's, yeah, she's right here.
Up to 600 square feet.
I think it's a good point. Maybe we split the sentence, shall not have more than 2 bedrooms with a period, and then it shall not be larger than 750 square feet. Good.
Thank you.
I mean, I think it's good. Is everybody else?
It's a minimal change, yeah. It means the same
Clarification,
thing. Yeah. Yep. Did you get that, Rick?
Well, shouldn't it just say, I would actually change it to say the DADU shall not be larger than 750 square feet, except as permitted. So take away the not have more than 2 bedrooms, because earlier in the document, it says in no case shall have more than 2
Okay,
bedrooms.
that's redundant.
So we should, it's
Yeah,
redundant,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, right, so take away shall not have more than 2 bedrooms.
Where is it in the,
It's
so
on-
everybody can
it's-
see it quickly here?
It's on the,
It's in the beginning part.
Yeah, just want to know. Let's see.
I'll find it.
Yeah.
Must be on page 7.
That's what I'm thinking.
Standards, it's under standards.
It's the
for
basic
all.
standards for all of them, I thought.
Maybe 8. Staples. On the wrong side.
Let's see.
I thought that's the first time it shows up, isn't it,
It's at
Rick?
the top of page 8.
Yeah, that's the one
Oh,
we're
no.
talking about.
That's attached.
Oh,
That's, yeah.
Is it in the definition?
Maybe we took it out. I'm thinking,
yeah. It should be in the general,
Right,
right?
should be in the
that
general,
says that
right.
again.
It
At
should
the
be
top of
standards
page
for
8,
all.
it says the same thing.
No, that's the one we're talking about.
Yeah,
that you
no,
brought up.
we should
right?
add it to 20.
Except
I don't
it's
see it
permitted
stru- I
through
don't see it-
conditional use permit.
I don't see it struck through anywhere, though.
So the top of page 8 is what I think you referred to originally.
No, I saw it on the top of page 10,
All
but
right,
it says the
thanks.
same
No,
thing
10,
as
no,
the
10's what we're looking at,
top
yeah.
top of page 8.
So that's for ADU versus DD. I think what we should do is we should put, shall not have more than 2 bedrooms in the general standards for everything.
Yeah,
So it applies to
Yeah.
all of them. Yeah.
Yep.
so
That
then we'll be
was-
removing
that
it from
was
page
in
8
there.
and 10.
And then adding
putting it in the front.
Under 20.
Yeah.
Under the general.
So it
We all
applies
go
to
back
everything.
and look, we might find it, because
Under
I,
10.81420, added under standards
in
for all
there.
accessory dwelling units. Yes, that makes more sense.
Yep.
And then we can take it away from the individual standards for AD.
Because we have it in the individual, but it should just be it's general standards for all.
Very good.
That starts on page 6, yeah.
on page 11, the 22 feet.
Yep.
If the, I appreciate it coming down, I'll say that. Would 22 feet, with or without dormers,
Yeah.
allow for living space on a third floor?
It could, limited living space.
What does
It would
that
be, well, it would be challenging. You'd only have 8 feet to the ridge. Typically, if you're going to have parking on the ground floor, in the instance where you have, first of all, you couldn't have a 3-story ADU unless it was the size of a garden shed on the ground. So think of a 2-car garage. 22 by 22 is pretty standard. 24 by 24 is the sort of maximum for 2-car garage. So imagine 22 by 22, it's, say, 500 square feet, it's 484, but let's round it to 500 square feet. So the first floor, in a structure that would be 22 feet tall, would be parking, and covered parking, which I would see as a benefit to the neighborhood than having a commercial parking lot with 4 or 5 spaces in front of a house or beside it, but that's an aesthetic argument. If you put the cars on the ground floor of the first 500 square feet, it leaves 500 square feet in the second floor. There'd be the ability to go in a limited fashion in that attic. If you have 22 feet, it barely works. At 20 feet, it doesn't work, and then you create all kinds of funky roof forms that are often awkward looking compared to the principal structure. You can't do gables, for example, without them looking like ranch houses in neighborhoods that aren't ranches. You would have flat roof buildings. I think the only architecturally appropriate roof with a 20-foot building would be a hip roof, like a Federal at the Runlet May or one of these the old Federal buildings that have the hip roof, where they don't have any habitable space. They might be vaulted ceilings in the second floor. That would be appropriate. So I would argue if this thing went to 20, that only hip roofs would be allowed on that 2-story structure, so we don't create odd-looking buildings with shed roofs, flat roofs, or really shallow pitched roofs because of the restriction of being at 20 feet. You typically are going to have 9 feet per floor to build that carriage house. 1 foot for the floor structure, 8 feet for the code. So 9 9's 18. You know, on a pitched roof, I think everybody knows by now, given the last set of zoning amendments, on a pitched roof, you measure to the middle. Flat roof, you measure to the top. So the character of Portsmouth in its residential neighborhoods are not flat roofs, they're pitched roof structures, whether they're garden sheds or houses. So that's why I went with 22 instead of 20, because
I propose 20.
well, oh, sorry. Well, I think, you might have mentioned 20. So we were kicking numbers around when it was 25. And I feel like 22 is a fair place to land. It may allow some limited space. We could also say there's no dormers and keep it at 22 so we don't screw up the roof forms because we're afraid someone's going to live there. If you had 22 feet, you could have a window in the gable if you had a pitched roof like most of the houses in Portsmouth, and you could do something up there in a very limited way and maybe put some skylights on the roof, but maybe not dormers. I mean, these are things to talk about, but I think what I want to avoid is choosing a number that makes everybody comfortable but creates abominations architecturally that we didn't expect would happen. So that was what I was trying to do with the 22, which I put that number in there and did a lot of drawings to address the issue. So there's the question of dormers versus hip roofs if we push it down. But I don't think a hip roof's going to work everywhere.
Okay, I guess, living in a neighborhood, just concerned about the massing and the look of massing and the, the ability to be peering out your third floor windows into someone's backyard, which you never could before, So that's where that height concerns me. And so, 2 feet doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be a lot if someone can be living in their third floor peering down at someone else's backyard. And that seems to be something that comes up when the planning board hears these, is that they don't want, the abutters don't want people peering into their backyards. So perhaps you could talk further about that.
Well, I would only say that anybody putting an accessory dwelling unit in a detached structure that's 2 stories with a flat roof is peering into anybody's backyard when the maximum height of a fence is 6 feet. You're going to be 16 feet above the neighbor's yard. So I think we just, I'd like to think we could put limited dormers not on the property line side of the neighbor,
Okay.
and maybe just skylights or something on the side that's closest to a neighbor. That would be a fair compromise to allow some limited usable space up there without feeling like you're living in a tunnel.
I'd feel better about that.
So I'll work on that if it's something you got.
No,
It's not a big,
I brought up dormers
amendment.
before. That was my
I think, I support it, but.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud right now. In our principles of all this, privacy is one of the things that, is part of our purpose, is to make sure we don't lose that privacy. So if dormers are always going to be a conditional use permit, then that gives flexibility to the board to say, no, you can't dormer out on a side that's on a property line, but maybe we'll let you do it on a side that's going to your own backyard or something like that. I believe we already
Yeah,
have
if you
that.
don't meet the setbacks.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, if you're, right. So I guess,
Because that would
So
always be
maybe
fine.
we-
I think that's already sort of built in
It
there,
is.
flexibility
but-
for decision
But
making.
maybe we could add, given we're making a few
Yep.
adjustments here anyway, we could add some language to make it clear to the decision makers who likely
they
won't
have
be
that
sitting here,
flexibility.
understanding what it means.
Sure.
That they should be looking at that aspect and
Okay.
rendering a decision. So that's a
Yep,
good.
we can make that.
My other comment was about the abutter notice to the approval by right. I think that it's obvious that that you kind of pushed it out into the front yard versus being in the bushes in the backyard for anybody that didn't want their neighbors to know that this was going to be happening. But people had mentioned it at the last meeting, the question of some type of notice being mailed to direct abutters, either side, front and back. And I heard Beverly at one point say that you had maybe 1 or 2 since you've been here since January that would have been approvals by right anyway. There weren't too many.
I can't actually, I'll be honest with you, let me see, attached, I haven't had, I'm trying to think of,
Well, my point,
I don't
I'm
know.
not trying
I don't
to
think
nail
so.
you down on numbers.
I don't think I actually have, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
If I
well,
said that, I
makes my-
apologize.
That makes my point even more.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you've got almost none, or maybe 1 in a year, that's going to is there a reason why you can't just send a letter to 4 people? I just don't understand why that seems to be such a sticking point. I heard the abutter notice in the, I understand legally there may be some ramifications, then don't make it in a abutter notice. Call it something else. Call it a letter to a neighbor, whatever you need to call it, so that it doesn't legally tie you up. But if you have someone who has an apartment, let's say, in a neighborhood, and the next door neighbor is going to be doing something, how many landlords drive by their apartments every month? Not necessarily, especially if you live out of town. How many people in town are, own houses and they leave for the winter and they're gone in Florida for 6 months, not driving by. They're, not at home to see that. And the only way they're going to know is if somebody sends them something. I really think you need to go back and look at this. I think.
I will check with the legal department to see whether or not we can legally do that. I just want to make sure and clear it with them. But maybe what I could suggest is that a letter-size picture of the actual sign that would get posted could be mailed to them. That would then just be the same notice, just in a different manner, and let me check with them as to whether or not.
I mean, we
can
have
do that.
friendly amendments, right? So certainly we can find a way
Oh,
to.
this can still change even as it
friendly.
moves forward. It's got multiple.
Well, I'm just
hearings.
talking about, we can find a way to friendly do it so that it's not necessarily tying you up legally, but you're sending something to abutters. Something needs to go to those direct abutters. I'm sure legally you can find
I've
some
made
way
a
of
note.
doing that.
I'll talk to the city attorney.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any comments on assisted living because, to be quite honest, the discussion ran through so quickly that I don't really even understand what you're doing. I will say that you never defined on that document NS or P, so I know you know what it means, but it took me halfway through your very quick discussion to figure out what NS and P were. I hope that's written in your will be written in your document somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, part of our code as a whole, we have not permitted, or special exceptions.
It's in the, it tells that in the zoning code, but you're right. For the red lines, it's not clear.
So, and maybe, I don't know, maybe you could just have more of a discussion. It just seems like it was like, whew, boy, that was quite a discussion in 3 minutes or less on assist. And I don't know, because I still don't really understand. I know that you're trying to allow for more
Just in more areas.
in more areas, but were there other things maybe that needed to be discussed in relationship to that? Because it just sort of seemed like you were switching Ns and Ss and Ps in neighborhoods, and that's all you were looking at. And so it just felt rushed, and it felt like there wasn't really much discussion that even I understood. And then the last thing is, I really wish that this committee could find some way of getting these materials out earlier. I've been saying this since the beginning. I know everybody's busy. I understand that. But if we're creating committees as a city, if the city council is creating committees and we don't have the time to get the information out in a timely fashion, maybe we shouldn't have the committee. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it needs to get out sooner than this. So, you have a group of people here that have been very devoted to coming once a month and talking to you and giving you feedback, which I know is what you wanted in this process. But for us not to get that material, Nick sent it to me late yesterday afternoon. I received it. That's not a lot of time to go through things, and I wish that we have a consultant working on this. I'm sure that he's not leaving it until like the day before the meeting to fix it.
Actually, it was just changed a couple, that we were still cleaning it up, so.
But
I know,
It's
yeah.
just because it goes through several
Partly my
different
fault.
people. It's trying to get people to reply.
Right.
So.
I'm just asking that I see other.
Nick had changes yesterday that we were
Okay,
responding
well,
to. Yeah.
That you care about.
That's not my business, not my problem. I'm just asking you to please, the governance committee gets their red lines out a week before. I just would like it to come out sooner than 12 hours.
Hopefully with our new position person that.
Well, and also keep in mind that when this gets to the planning board, because this is a working group, and but when it gets to the planning board, where I think there'll be some real deliberation, and even when it gets to the council, it'll be published with the packet a week out. So I think that this is a new sort of working group, but I think that we'll get, the packets go out almost a week in advance of the planning board. So
But I
that
still
will.
think they should go out for this committee. If you would like feedback from residents, it should go out more than 12 hours before. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Liza.
Let me excuse myself for a moment, yeah.
Good morning, Elizabeth Prater, property owner, 159 McDonough Street. I did not do my homework because I was on vacation, and even if I had gotten it a week early, I wouldn't have had time to read it. I did want to have somebody clarify for me. I agree with everything that Liza said. As a property owner, I can tell you if there are 2 bedrooms, there are two cars. So even 1 bedrooms have 2 cars sometimes. So I think the parking in general needs to be reviewed. There is a lot of conflict in parking generally in the Portsmouth zoning code. We could talk about that for about a month. I understand the heights. I would like to see stipulations, reminders that there are other things in regards to the skylights and dormers, to see other ordinances. I agree with that. I like what Nick said about that. I 100% agree with somehow, I like your idea of the sign. I did want to know that I would like to see for the next meeting what the sign is going to say, because as a citizen, when I look at a sign and it says, if you want to appeal this, you have to go to some whatever, I would rather have the sign say simply, if you have any questions or comments regarding this, please contact whatever you want me to do, because I think the appeal process is something that sounds very scary to a citizen, as opposed to saying, if you have any questions or comments about this, please contact whoever it is they want to contact. Because I think a lot of times we put a lot of stuff on these signs and nobody has any clue what they mean, and then they don't bother. And getting people to participate obviously is an issue. I agree with getting the information sooner, but I understand how that works, because I've often talked to people at the last minute and they said, oh, we'll fix that before the meeting. So I would like to have assisted living clarified as to what is being changed. It shows GRA, GRB, GRC, Gateway, MRO, and L1 and L2. So where is the line where you wanted them all to stay special exception? I
GRA, GRC, GAMH.
Just the top 3.
So why wouldn't
If you
you
look
want?
at this chart, it's easier to look at.
Oh, I thought this was easier myself, but yeah. So GRA, GRC, the Gateway, how about MRO, and at CD4L1 is the same as GRA?
It's special exception already.
Oh, it is already?
For centers, yes. And
Okay,
so
well, it's not on the list, so.
For living home, it's permitted, but not for centers.
Okay.
Centers are the bigger ones.
Okay, so you're leaving living home, so centers are being left as special exception.
Except for where they already are permitted, and they're adding permitted to G1 and G2.
I will look here, maybe it'll be good. Okay.
Yes, there's only 4 centers.
Yeah, centers are only currently allowed in 2 places, so we're adding G1 and G2 to the 2 places they're currently permitted.
Okay, and you're leaving them as special exceptions for all the rest.
Correct.
And then the homes, you're making them permitted pretty much everywhere except for in general business.
Except, no, we're GRA, GRB, GRC, and GHMH, they're going to be special exceptions.
Okay, so we are, those are going to be,
Yeah,
and then at CD5 is where you're going to switch it to permitted.
permitted,
Okay,
correct.
that's fine. Okay, all right. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning, everybody. Are we supposed to say our name like we do? Greg Mahana.
for the record.
Greg Mahana, Portsmouth, 3 Pheasant Lane. Let's see, where was I at? Just to clarify the progress, I think Beverly mentioned it, but this, at some point, what point, will the draft, not final, go to planning board?
I'm hoping that after everyone's done public speaking today, that we will make a decision. If we move it, we have to move it to city council, who then recommends it to planning board, and then that's when it goes to planning board. So that will be what will happen next if we decide to move forward with the changes that we've talked about. So it goes, so if that's the case, we could be at the November 14th city council meeting to refer to the planning board for its December meeting.
not to be argumentative, but I think it's supposed to go to planning first by state RSA.
We've always sent it to city council for referral to.
I don't, that's okay.
That's how our.
But RSA 10.152 says all petitions or requests for amendments to zoning ordinance shall be referred to the planning board for its consideration, and then the board shall submit its recommendation concerning such petitions and requests to the city council. I'd like it to go to planning board first.
Actually, that's
Where it's going.
what you just read. It says shall be referred to the planning board, so that's what it means. It gets
City council
referred
refers it to the
from
planning
the city
board.
council to the planning board.
Then
But
you
they don't
get-
touch it. They just.
No,
It's
they
just
just
referred.
refer it.
And they get your recommendation back, just
But
like
it
we
also
just
puts
did.
it out there publicly for like 2 months for people to, or a whole month, or however long the period
It
is.
seems that
So-
slows the process down unnecessarily. And
That's the way it
That's what,
works.
that's
If
the
they
way
don't
it
want to
is.
change
Yeah.
the zoning, then it won't get changed. That's why it goes that way. They're the gatekeeper. You guys could do whatever you want in the planning board. They don't have to pass it.
They could say, we don't want to change the zoning, and we're not going to refer it to the planning board, and
You
it's
don't
just
want to
going to
waste
go
your
away, and we're
time
not going to
as
change
a planning
anything.
board member. If they
Well,
don't
it sounds like it's wasting city council's time, but needless to say. Anyhow, I'll reiterate what Liza said about the public notice on the ADUs. I mean, I'm a landlord, and putting a sign out front is not adequate. So your idea of mailing the actual notice that's supposed to be posted out front to the 4 abutters is a great idea. Thank you very much. The last thing I wanted to talk about was parking is not working real well the way we're doing it. It seems to create a lot of trouble, rounding up, rounding down, this, that, and the other thing. And I just want to throw this out there. This is just an opening thing. We're not going to talk about it. I'll be done after I say it. But we should move parking out of zoning into site plan review, like a lot of other people do it.
I agree. I think parking needs to be reviewed as a whole as to how we handle it, but I think
It's
that
just
needs
a
to be a whole
concept.
separate.
Well, I'm just beginning that whole separate as whatever you're.
Needs to be its own separate thing that we take on as parking across
It
the
would be
whole city.
easier. And I don't, maybe site plan review is not the right place for it, but
Well, the
maybe
problem is,
someplace.
yeah.
Corey seems to agree. I mean, you've been doing this a long time, and now you're actually even laughing about it. And Beth seems to agree.
Parking,
So
I smile every time someone mentions parking because I feel like that's what I've talked about 90% of my life in the 10 years I've been around the city.
maybe we can all agree on something. We can move it someplace that we can agree on and make it easier for all of us to work on. That's all I got.
Yep.
Happy,
Thank you.
Happy,
We will take
happy
a-
Friday.
We'll take a look at that.
Peter Huda, 288 South Street. The first thing I'd like to address is what Liza and Greg did on the abutters notice. I've asked for this abutters notice. I think that's a good idea. I don't think you should go around this by administrative approval at all. And I can tell you I will be speaking against this going forward if there is no notice to the abutters. That's number one. On the materials, not going out ahead of time. On all other committees and boards, 24-hour notice is required. And I know because we asked previously, yesterday they were not out. Whether you're in the middle or whatever, put something out for us to look at, please, on that one. Okay, and now I'll go to parking. So, I'm going to kind of recite numbers here because I've cross-checked the numbers that were in here. And to Mr. Trainer's point here, so on the chart, I don't know what page it is, so we've got 10.1112.20 gives you the calculation of the parking spots. That is above the chart that is number 10.111231, parking requirements and residential uses. The calculation reflected of rounding up is not reflected in your chart. So that is confusing, very confusing. So my question is, can we just put it in there? People look at the chart, they don't go and look at what's above this, and it's still confusing. And we still have in here 0.5 amount of spaces. Right above it, you have your round up. So that's one thing. So you have a conflict right there. And then if I go back to your actual site development plan standards, number 10.111220 calculation, you actually went back in and changed everything back in the original part where everything is. So it's changed in two spots. So the question is, why are we making this so confusing here? Why doesn't the chart match what the code says right above there?
The chart meaning the other section of the code?
Why
You're talking about the parking section.
the parking section? Why does not section, and I'm going to just spit out the numbers, 10.1112.20, where it says fractional spaces will be rounded up, match what you have in the chart on 10.1112.311?
Because this has been written to be more restrictive than the chart.
No, she's
No,
talking
she's
about
talking, no,
within the.
I think what she's talking about, what you mentioned earlier, which is if you have 3 500-square-foot units, you add up those 3,
You get two.
you get 2.
You get 1.5, so you get
You don't
You
get
get 2, you get 2, right. So the numbers in the chart are for each individual unit in the building. So it's different if you have a
Sum
one-unit
it
building.
and add
Otherwise,
and round
it would make 0 sense to have any fractions if everything
Right,
rounded
right,
up.
yeah.
So
Well, you're also confusing here with square feet. It's the same thing that Liza said. You've got 500 square feet is 0.5.
Right.
Actually, it's 1.
No, not if you have
Only
3
if they're
500-square-foot units, you've got 3 times 0.5, which is 1.5, which rounds up to 2.
You do the rounding after the
you
aggregation.
round the building, you don't round each unit.
Yeah. You aggregate and then
Whatever's
you
in
round
it.
up.
Right.
So if you do an attached ADU, and the main house is over 750, and the ADU is under 500, before this was written the way it is today, you'd only need 3 spaces for that ADU, and the 2 spaces,
Two
sorry.
spaces, 2 spaces,
1.8
yeah,
would
right.
be what you get, sorry.
Now you need 3.
Now you need 3.
Yeah, so now you need 3. This is 50% more than what that chart says you need.
This is very confusing.
Understood.
My question is, can we standardize here? Can you actually make the code that is 15 years old match what we should have here?
Well, it's actually 3 or 4 years old, the latest version of the code. Those numbers aren't that old, maybe they're 5.
Well, they're well before I retired.
The way it.
The chart in the ordinance is well before I
But it's not
retired.
15 years, Rick. We came
Well,
up with the half and the
Okay,
1.
whatever.
Okay,
They've
Been around a while.
Relevant, whatever.
No,
But
point
can we
about
Please
it.
standardize.
What if you said in this section on accessory dwelling units, just to get away from that chart, in 810.81426, what if you just said, at least, just get rid of that first
I'd get rid of the
phrase,
first clause.
And just said, at least 1 off-street parking
Yeah.
spaces shall be provided for an ADU with up to 750 square feet.
Let's listen
and
to
at least
2.5
Get rid
on
of the
mine.
reference back to the
Well,
parking.
yeah, I just changed it because I was making the edits from this meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, you added in something.
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Is this public comment or?
So
Well, we're trying to figure out how to
we're trying
address your
address
concern.
issue, and that
Do you care whether we do it?
clarifies it.
Does that make sense to
does
address
to
your
me.
concern? Yeah.
We won't reference that table
We won't reference the parking.
because it's confusing perhaps
We'll
for
just
people to
put-
go to the table.
Right.
Well, the other thing I'd like to see is it consistently applied through your whole code here, because I've seen within the last week a developer come up and present that table and said, we are following what you say, and their interpretation is based on what they want to see and not based on which part of the code.
Right. What you're
is
talking about is what
conflicting.
we just talked about, which is that the parking whole section needs to be reworked. But
Right.
we're not doing that right now. We're just talking about what was in front of us. So
And
we
we're
will take a look
reworking
at.
it for this.
Right. We're reworking it for this, but, so we won't
So
point back to it.
the error, it's still going to be there, is what
No,
you're telling
this
me.
is-
We're not changing the parking standards right now. We're changing the ADUs. And we
Right.
can fix the parking within the ADUs, but I can't fix all of the parking at this moment.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Now, there's a conflict also on 10.814, and I think I was following, but I'm not sure because the numbers weren't mentioned. 10.81441. In there, you have a DADU shall not be more than 2 bedrooms and shall not be larger than 750 square feet of area. Then it says, and if the blue is a change, except as permitted through the conditional use permit provided in 10.440, use number 1.224. Man, you guys can.
We're taking out
Okay,
the reference to the 2 bedrooms.
I know, I'm not done. So then below, you actually go, you say up top, you can't be larger than 700 square feet, and then you go and put in 10.814.411. In no case shall a DADU be larger than 1,000 square feet. And then you keep going and say it can't be larger than the principal structure. So as a normal person looking at this is very confusing to me, and it looks like you have a conflict between the number 41 and number 411 in here. So I ask you just to look at that, because it's confusing to me.
Is there a way to pull possibly 411 into the first one?
It's only allowed in certain areas, which is why that's, because there's only certain districts that allow it to go up to
1,000.
And it's based off of lot area, which is why it's a subset.
Yep, okay.
Could that be noted somehow?
Well, it says use number 1.224, right?
Goes to use table, yeah.
So the use table then tells you that. Yeah.
So the general public has to go and cross-reference all of this. Still
They're
confused.
going to have to
Well,
start with
once
the
the
table
handbook's
anyway.
done.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. I just had a conflict here, 10.814.433. You say the building height, and I think this is the same as what Liza brought up. In the one above it, in 10.814.432, the building height of the entire building containing the DADU shall be no greater than 22 feet. And then the next one says, when the building containing the DADU is taller than the principal building, whoa, its required setback from all property lines shall be increased by the difference in the building height between the DADU and the principal building.
Right, so if you have a ranch that is just a one-story building, but you have a garage with an ADU on top of it, it has to be a certain distance set back and within that from the principal dwelling unit. That's
But it also pushes it back farther from the property line as
from the
well.
property line.
So basically, we are allowing
Taller building.
taller
ADU.
buildings in the back.
Yep.
Taller than the principal, but it can't be more than the 22 feet.
Yeah.
And this was to take advantage of the fact that some people do have ranch houses. So if you have a ranch house,
That's 10 feet tall. Yeah.
right,
Okay. That, to me, that's still really confusing. And the last comment on 10.814.435, you still have the 2,000 square foot in here and the 1,000. It's just my opinion, but this is too big. Some of this is bigger than the footprint of my house. So you're adding another house to the area. I am in an area over on South Street where I could possibly have 3 of these abut to my property, which would close in everything, which would be take away my privacy, take away everything that I bought the land for. I would also tell you, when I bought this property, and Nick knows this because I had to go for permits, I was building an addition on the back, and my contractor was in the hole putting the framing up. I had a woman from the back side come over and start screaming at my contractor. What are you doing? You're building apartments, blah, 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 blah. We bought that lot back there because we want privacy. People want privacy. That's why they build these. That's why they buy what they buy. And I think we're kind of losing this in our consideration here. And it's all over in this small area. This size is very, very large for where you're trying to shoehorn these things in. One last one I think I had, or that's it. Again, to reiterate, please look at your parking. It's still confusing, and it needs to be standardized. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to give up on the abutters notices with the admin. I think people need to be notified. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? All right, we need to, so we have a short list of possible changes. I'm going to check with the legal department about whether or not we could add to mail, copies of the sign. I don't want us to have to write something new, but whatever the sign works out to be, whether or not those can be mailed to direct abutters, and ask whether or not that is a legal thing to do. We'll work on getting a sample of the sign to move forward with this so that people know exactly what it says on it.
Rick's going to
Rick's gonna-
adjust the two-bedroom.
Yeah, he's
I've
going to
done that.
adjust the two
Add it to
bedroom.
general requirements and
Yeah.
remove it from
It's
the other.
done. And I've taken away that introductory phrase on the parking. Yep,
Yep.
And remove the parking table reference.
yep, yep.
And I'm going to
Look at the
probably, I'm going to
dormers.
look at the dormer issue within the side yard setback on the 22-foot structure.
Okay.
And I'm also going to, for what it's worth, take a look at the 2,000 square foot, the last comment that was made, given we've made adjustments to the height of the building. That could be maybe tightened up a little bit on the footprint, on the
That's
gross
not-
floor.
well, it's, 2,000 is not the footprint, it's the
No, it's the gross floor area.
Gross floor
Gross
area.
floor area.
Understood. I'm
Yeah.
going to give it just another pass for
Okay.
what it's worth, because I think
Well,
it's a comfortable number.
Can you do that soon?
Yeah.
Are you talking about are you talking about the 2,000 square feet that it's in?
It's the
building?
volume.
The building.
It's the volume
Yeah.
of the whole building. It's
It could
every
probably
level.
Right.
get a haircut.
Still has a minimum of what the.
I mean, it's still governed it's still governed by the building coverage,
Yeah.
the setbacks, and the height
It is.
restrictions of that district. So this was a
is.
way to solve for.
And it can't be more than 75% of the
Yeah.
principal structure. But I think it's worth giving it one more pass, since we're looking at some other stuff.
Okay, if we could make those changes and adjustments, does everyone feel comfortable moving this to planning board,
To the city council.
city council to go to
I
planning
do.
board?
Yep.
All right, we have consensus. So I will get on mine, you all can get on your parts, and then we'll move this forward to its first public hearing.
To the referral.
The referral, which
And then
then
the hearing.
goes to a
Yeah,
public
just
hearing.
For everybody else.
This,
It's enough confusion.
We will move this, if I can get all these changes in by early next week, we can make the November 14th city council meeting to refer this to the planning board, hopefully for December.
And to bring it back for a first reading so that we don't have to do that as a separate action.
That's a separate action, right?
And
Yeah.
just to clarify, there's no public hearing on this at that city council meeting on the 14th.
No, there's public comments, so it'll be in the package if somebody wants to talk about it.
Sure.
But there'll be a public hearing at planning board.
Yep, gotcha.
And then a second one at the city council when it comes back.
Right.
When it comes back again. So,
Actually, 3.
well,
Two.
they can talk, there's only one public hearing, there's 3 readings.
Yes, understood.
We can listen to it 3 different times, but yeah, there's, and it depends on whether or not, how quickly they move it through, so.
Yep.
That's where we can set.
And
If everybody feels comfortable with that?
Will that be for both this and assisted living?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Based off of the changes that we talked about, I'd like to send both of them. And so I think you were not here when I made the initial announcements when we started the meeting, so I will repeat them again. We've received a $250,000 grant that we applied for to hire a community housing navigator position, which Beverly was so grand in getting the application done. So that person's going to be here staffed at the city for 2 years to be able to help us do all outreach to the community and do everything housing with the staff. So, and then we just also received another $82,000 to help pay for a consultant to help us with phase 3. So with all that in mind and lots of celebrations around the holiday season coming up, I was going to suggest that we cancel our December Land Use Committee meeting, and we'll let the new position, hopefully we'll have someone hired maybe by the first of the year, and then hit the ground running with phase 3 for this work group in January. What's everyone think about that?
Sounds good.
I also need to announce that Sarah LaChance is no longer going to have the ability to join us from the EDC, so I am working on recruiting another EDC member to join us as well.
So I think the first things that will come back will be that ADU handbook for review by the Land Use Committee, and then also, and that doesn't need to be, I think, adopted in any formal way, really just a reflection of whatever the adopted ordinance ends up at. And then the public involvement plan, the housing coordinator will navigate, will be working with UNH to develop a public involvement plan for phase 3, and there will be some and a market study will precede that, which is not uncommon to try and make sure that the incentives are calibrated to actually be utilized. So those 2 things will be the work of, I think, the next 6 to 8 months, and then you'll start to see the drafts come forward.
Okay,
So we will start on that work hopefully in January.
awesome.
All right, with that, with no other comments, I will conclude the meeting. Everyone, have a great day. Enjoy the beautiful weather.
Yeah.
We are done.